Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Teach Sleep Repeat. My name is Dylan.
And my name is Hayden. Where are we?
We're in our new studio that we've been teasing for the last 10 months.
Are we, Dylan? Is this our new studio?
No, we're not, no.
Yeah.
But we do have similar chairs, you were saying.
Yeah, we have exactly identical shit.
Not identical.
Oh, okay, sorry. Ever so slightly different shades of blue chairs in our new studio, which is still upcoming.
It will come up, I promise you, at some point in the near future. Maybe. I don't know. Anyway, we're here. Last week, we spoke about leaving teaching. Huge podcast episode for us to actually put it out there because, like you said, we've been spending a lot of time. A lot of our listeners got in touch and they said, I had no idea. I listen every week and I didn't know. And I was like, because we kind of really didn't mention it for a long time.
Yeah.
Big decision for us. How do you feel having put it out there now that we're teaching?
So beforehand, I was quite nervous about it because I didn't know what the reaction was going to be. I feel much better now because we've had a lot of really, really nice messages, like genuinely long, just thought out messages from people saying, thank you, basically.
And you struggle with being long-winded and thoughtful. So that's amazing.
I struggle. I thought this must be fake. This must be fake. But they were really nice messages because they were basically saying, like, they all had this similar sort of vibe to them, which was, I'm glad you're still doing the podcast because I was worried that people would be like, oh, I don't want to listen then. I don't want to listen to you anymore. And they were like, I'm glad you're still doing the podcast. I'm glad you were honest about the reasons and you're giving it a fair whack as well. I think I was worried, and I think you were a bit worried as well about being overly negative about teaching in general and why we're leaving. And I think people were pretty comfortable with the fact that no, we're giving it a very fair whack. This is the downsides, this is the upsides, and we've chosen to leave teaching for these reasons. So
a huge thing that I found from people messaging, and again, I just want to say directly to you guys now, thank you so much for your messages because it really settled us quickly. I remember hovering over that send button on Instagram because on Sunday night I thought, let's just do a post about it and see what happens. And people were so nice. And a huge chunk of you guys listening at home are teachers at the start of their career, thinking about training or have just started their ECT journey. And something I'm really, really passionate about, and we spoke about it at the end of last week, is not wanting to completely put people off this career because it is amazing. Teaching is genuinely amazing and I will never regret doing it. And you asked me last week if I'd ever say to someone, well, would you still become a teacher? Would I say, yeah, it's worth doing? And the honest answer is I still would to the right person. And there's so many people out there who messaged along the lines of, cool, thank you so much. But, you know, we're going to stick to it. Thanks for being real and having eyes open to what's about to come.
I thought that, and then I went to moderation this week, and then that changed my mind. No, I'm joking. But
so you had this really, really nice thought of, oh, maybe teaching is lovely, and then you went to writing moderation.
Yeah, and then I went back to work, and I remember there's so many elements that I just grind my gears. Yeah.
We spoke about writing moderation very briefly the other week, so you actually went through it properly now. A bunch of people online were messaging saying, no, we can't choose our own books to take to moderation. We get given the names of the people. You went to moderation.
Yeah.
What happened?
Everyone takes their own books. You choose your own books. Yeah. I think maybe, just give people some credit here, maybe they were just misunderstanding the difference between moderations when a moderator comes into your school, which is a lot more formal and a lot more intense, because you give them you tend to give them a whole year group list, and they just go, let's just pick some kids.
Yeah, random, sure.
It's kind of random, but they're picking, right? But no, absolutely not. At county moderation, certainly in our county, everyone the instructions say bring 5 books, or if you have a cohort that's bigger than like 32, just bring 15% of your cohort. That's it.
And so, you know, when you're taking these, this is the point we're trying to make. When you take these books to moderation and you're saying, okay, I've judged this child to be expected standard, and you will take a child who you know is solidly expected. Yeah. That's the point. You won't take someone on the cusp. Yeah. When that gets moderated and you all agree that that is the expected standard, the point being you can go back to school and tick off everyone you've said is expected, even if clearly they're not at that level, and it's a way of getting through more children so you make your data look better.
It's a very cynical view, but it's true because like you even said that's the point, and it's ironically it's not the point of doing that. The actual point, the real purpose, like we said last time, is you're supposed to bring books that are kind of on the cusp, but no one does, and that's why I started this whole thing of like, oh yeah, moderation's reminding me that I don't want to do this anymore, because it's just another one of those farcical parts of this job where it's like
we all pretend it's doing the job it isn't.
And you know what was really interesting to me? The fewest number of people I've ever seen there.
Really?
Yeah. In fact, it was like almost embarrassingly low numbers of schools turning up to it.
So is that schools who aren't doing internal moderation formally are basically saying, oh, we won't go and we'll just put through our numbers?
Because it is optional in quotation marks to go to moderation. Yeah, it's just very it's frowned upon if you don't go, and the idea is it scares you into thinking that they might come and check on us more often. Then if we don't do this thing, you're supposed to do it, tick a box, right? Yeah. But it also costs money People forget that bit. It costs money to send teachers to moderation.
Schools famously have loads of that lying around.
Schools have loads of money, especially when it's like £200 a day per person.
Yeah, wow.
So, you want to send
three of you went?
Yeah, you want to send 2 or 3.
Where are we getting that from?
That's what I mean. But like and normally we send 2 and we had to send 3 this time because I'm leaving. So it was kind of like a transitional thing for the other member of staff who's not been before.
Right.
But there was a lot of people there saying, my school could only afford to send me and I've got like 18 books to go through. And I'm like, I was looking at them. But there was just lots of schools that just went, nah, we're just not paying it. We'll take our chances. And I thought that was really interesting because I've not seen, that was like a big shift compared to all the previous years that I've done as well.
Well, you were telling me about someone you met at moderation, and something I wanted to touch on quickly because we're speaking about leaving teaching in general last week. We're going to speak to Sophie today. I can't wait to speak to her about the journey she's gone on leaving teaching and how you can still impact children outside of that and still have a kind of drive to want to help children. We were speaking earlier about someone you spoke to at moderation who's become a mum. And there's this idea at the minute in teaching of new mums being penalised. Because let's face it, a huge chunk of teachers, especially in primary school, are female. And when they come to have children of themselves, for themselves, they're going back to work and it's just not viable. And they're going part-time, taking a hit on their money.
Yeah.
You spoke to someone who's really interesting. They worked something out.
Yeah, so let me tell you what they said. So basically, when we got bored of moderating books after 3 hours, we were talking just about life.
Pay £200 for this catch-up.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I pay. Yeah, our school paid £200 for me to go and chat to this teacher. Don't tell anyone. It's a good job we're not telling everybody in the world. I spoke to she was a young mum. She's a fairly new mum and said she's back off maternity leave now. And she's working 4 days a week at school. And she said, it's great. It's worked out really well. She's like really appreciated the extra day and said, it's not that crazy hit in terms of money. We've spoke about that before, like what you actually take before tax and all that. But she said, due to her circumstances and not really having any family around to help with childcare and things, she just has to go back to work 5 days from September next year. And she said she's kind of dreading it a bit because she has quite enjoyed having that other day off.
So if she hasn't got childcare, how is she working more? Is this for nursery fees?
Yeah, it's a bit of an awkward one, right? So it works out better for them financially, very slightly, and this is the kind of the crux of the story, right? That they both work. So her and her partner both work full time, and then they have to pay for nursery fees. And she said the painful bit came when she sat down and actually worked out the net gain in what she's earning when you account for the fact that her child is now going to be going to nursery on the Friday as well as the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
So going from 4 days a week, Monday to Thursday, to 5 days a week, Monday to Friday, what impact did that have on what she earned?
So she worked out that she gained £36 for that Friday. So she was like, so I'm going to work on a Friday, doing a whole day of teaching. You know what that entails. And again, we'll speak to Sophie about all this sort of stuff in a bit. She got £36 extra in her pay packet because you got to deduct the nursery fees.
Wow.
So yeah, she was like, I'm not really sure. She was like laughing, because of that laugh where it's like, I'm actually dying inside here because I don't think this is worth doing. Yeah. And I was like, oh yeah. That is
we really do. We live in a society now where that £36 becomes, even though if you break it down, you say, oh, that's £4 an hour. It's £36 more. Yeah. And they're probably in a situation like many families up and down where they think, do you know what? Obviously, I'm going to have to do a whole extra day's work for this, but I need that extra 30 quid. Comes down to that.
Yeah. And it honestly, it just kind of sucks. I felt really sorry for her because I could tell she didn't want to do that. Yeah. I could tell that she quite enjoyed the balance of 4 days a week of teaching and 3 days, the weekend. And it's not even 3 days really, is it?
No, of course not.
It's not 3 days because she'll be doing her planning and marking and things at the weekend.
And ultimately, who really misses out is the child as well. Yeah. Because we want, we're in a stage right now where people aren't having children as much because it's not just because they're willy-nilly thinking, I won't bother doing it anymore. Yeah. It's because I know so many people around my age who are thinking, well, I'll put that off because I just can't afford to do it. And it's situations like this. Why? You've got to work to the bone, both of you full time, just to pay for your child to be looked after by someone else. You're burnt out when you get home. You spend the weekend catching up on the little bits and bobs you want to do. And ultimately, it's the child who misses out. And a big thing at the minute I've seen is a push for paternity pay being moved up. And as teachers, we got 2 weeks off. Yeah. And it was a godsend when that 2 weeks aligned with a half term because we got 3 weeks instead. And it's just, we got to make so many changes, I think. And we're going to talk with Sophie about how the education system in general has become broken and why maybe people are leaving. But people are absolutely right. And some people commented this and they said, guys, you're going to realize very soon that a lot is broken right now. It's not just a case of education and isolation is gone bad.
No, I don't think I ever thought that, to be fair. We never really thought that. It's just that we can talk about that thing.
Yeah.
And some people, that's what annoys me sometimes when people say, oh, it's not just that, you know. I was like, well, no, it's not just. I'm not claiming that this is the only problem in the world. Exactly. It's just that we know about this one. We can talk about this one. You know, other people can talk about other things.
Why don't you talk about other things? Sorry, it's called teach, sleep, repeat. It's not called welding, sleep, repeat.
I mean, it might as well be soon, you know.
We've got an announcement to make, guys. We're moving into the welding world. We're not.
No, we're not.
Have you, before we go and chat to Sophie, I'm wondering, because I'm just thinking about the fallout from announcing we're leaving teaching and like the public and what they've said online and Instagram and things like that. Have you told the children in your class now then, because obviously we announced it and we said we'd tell the children, how have they taken it?
I had a really, really nice chat with mine. Genuinely, so I have told them, not, you know, long story short. But I've got such a mature class this year. I generally do anyway, but I love talking to this class. Like we have such deep conversations about things, like particularly in our RE lessons and things where you can go into like really big conversations. And we were just talking, I think it might have even been an RE lesson, I don't know, but we were talking about like contentness and happiness and kind of what people want from life. And we were talking about material things because that's where it came from. The kids were saying that it's really hard, like harder now than ever before, because there's so much social media telling us we need all these things and we need to look a certain way and buy certain things and do this.
And the fact they're feeling that already as year 6 children is insane, isn't it?
Exactly.
Just as a standalone point.
So I felt like I couldn't just gloss over that.
Sure.
I was like, we have to talk about this then for a minute.
And if it means I don't have to teach the lesson I don't want to teach, fine.
Oh no, we accidentally talked for 2.5 hours. Hang on, give it 5 more minutes and then I'll say this again.
I used to do that in secondary school all the time.
Keep the teacher talking about something. Right? Yeah. And we ended up talking about this whole thing about like, okay, what's the point then? Like, if we just want to be happy, like what actually is that then? Is it just more money? Is it just money? And we were talking about the less naive things of like, well, obviously money does buy a little bit of happiness and that you can do things with money that might unlock certain things that you enjoy. Yeah. But it's not the only thing. And the kids are talking about this. And they challenged, one of the boys challenged me, and it wasn't like they weren't trying to be silly. They're being real. And I'd already announced, you know, a few days before that I was going to be leaving teaching. I'll be leaving with them because they're year 6 and going on. Yeah. And he just said, okay, but Mrs. Stevens, why is it that you're leaving teaching then? Because I've also made it really clear to them that I absolutely love being in the classroom with them. Like that's my favorite part of my day is being in the classroom with them. I love that. So he very, very like I get it. Why he said this. Put 2 and 2
together.
He was like, okay, so you said like money is not the only reason to be happy. You said you love being in the classroom with us. So why are you leaving teaching to go and do like businessy things? And it was really sort of like, okay, this is quite a challenging question. So to cop out, what I'm going to do is pretend that you're in that situation. And because obviously I had an answer and I can tell you what I said, but I kind of want to know what you would say in that moment with those kids. Yeah. I asked you that.
I don't think it's that tricky because I think we just stick true to ourselves. Like we've always said on the podcast, you spoke about it last week. I would say to that child at that point that I am choosing happiness. It is as simple as that. And you know, there's a couple of ways we can explain this. I'm losing my pay packet for teaching. I'm not suddenly earning thousands of pounds extra. I'm walking into a different job. Yeah. I've come to the point where you've assessed happiness in life. For me personally, I'd say to him, I want to spend more time with my son. And it's not a case of I don't want to work hard. I do really want to work hard. I want to work hard on things I'm really passionate about. That's why we're staying in education. That's why we're really going to try and make a difference. We're trying to expand this podcast, try and do more in the business world, sure, but to help children ultimately. And I can be flexible. So if my son, you know, when he grows up to go to school and there's a sports day, I don't need to grovel to someone and say, oh, please, can I go and watch my son? I'll just move things around. I can go and do it. I am ultimately choosing happiness personally by choosing to leave education. And I think that's something you can easily explain to the children and say, you know, I'm not motivated by one thing in particular, but if I had to pick something, it would be my ultimate well-being and happiness. And I think this decision, despite me loving a part of it, there's other things that come with it. And you don't need to go into detail with the child about the highs and lows of filling out assessment forms. You know, they don't need to know that. But what they need to know is that by making this decision, it's not a slight on everything I've said. I'm not being hypocritical. What I'm doing is I'm just choosing to be happy in a different way, which I think will be better overall. Yeah. And at that point, they regret asking, you know. Life story, you know, they're like, all right, I just wanted you to say that you do like us and you're going to be sad about it. All right, I didn't need your life story, mate. Cheers. But yeah, in a nutshell, I mean, there's not much to add because I kind of said the same sort of thing to them. And I just was really real with them. You know, I was just honest. And I was even honest about like the parts of the job that I don't find as enjoyable. Like teaching you. Did you say that? Yeah, no, absolutely not. Can you imagine? Yeah, I did, yeah. No. Yeah, but I was just real, and he was like, "Oh, fair enough, that makes sense." Yeah. And I was quite glad that I could just have that candid, like real. A big thing I think about the reason why I love it as well with children, there's no filter whatsoever. And you can have those conversations with them. And I think people again who aren't around children as much, I've had conversations before where they say, "You said that to them." And I said, yeah, because they can understand this.
Yeah.
If a child's being annoying to another child, I can say to this 8, 9-year-old, well, why do you think they don't want to play with you? You're being annoying right now. You're doing something that's annoying them and they don't want to be around you.
Yeah.
And a lot of people think, oh, you can't say that. You need to sugarcoat it in this way or that way. You can have that professional dialogue. And if you know your children, you wouldn't say it to some of them.
Yeah, exactly.
But there's some children who you go, no, we can handle this right now. I'm going to talk to you real for a second. And this is why. And I think in that situation, like you said, depending on who asked me, it would shape my answer. Basically, I'd tell them the truth or I'd just simplify it and say, look, I am choosing happiness. I'm doing this. And me choosing happiness is chatting to Sophie about how she's built this business outside of teaching and what she can do outside of it.
Yeah, which I'm really looking forward to doing. So can we get on with it?
Right, let's do it. Let's go. Sophie, nice of you to join us. Lovely to see you.
Nice to meet you. How are you?
I'm great. I mean, I'm in this comfortable sofa that we've spoken about. Absolutely lovely.
And feeling relieved now that the news is out.
I know.
It's mad.
It's big. We've left. We're leaving teaching. It's still, I can't get my head around it. We spoke about it all last week on last week's episode. But we wanted to chat with you specifically as well about your journey to going from a teacher in the classroom to making that leap to leaving, because so many people have messaged us and said, it's something I want to do. It's something I think will happen eventually.
Yeah.
And they just have so many different reservations. So I guess to start with, I'm interested in your journey. How long have you been teaching? When did you make that first decision that I'm going to have to leave at some point? And how long did it take? What did you do?
Yeah, so I was a TA before I was a teacher. So I started as a TA just before my daughter was born, so 9 years ago. And then I trained to be a teacher through Schools Direct on the job. So a bit different to some teachers. And then I've been teaching for 7.5 years before I made the decision to leave. Huge decision.
It's big, isn't it?
Yeah.
How did that feel? Because obviously, in that 7.5 years, when did you first start to think, I don't think this is a job for life?
Yeah. I don't know if I even think that now. Like, I always set out with this was really secure from a dynasty of teachers. So my mum was a TA for 20 plus years. My sister's a teacher. My brother's a teacher.
Wow.
My husband, his mum. So I'm from a real history of teachers. And I think it's seen as like a nice, secure job, respectable. So I, sort of fell into it. I was a dancer previously and then retrained as a teacher. So it was my job that I was going to do because it fitted in with the kids and until it didn't.
Do you feel like you knew, maybe because you're root in as a TA, do you feel like you knew what you were getting into, maybe even better than people who come in blind, they're just trained to be teachers?
As I've gone on, I've seen teachers fresh out of uni, and I think that's a complete shock to the system. I feel like I had a little bit of an insight into what was going on in the landscape. It definitely made me a better teacher to work with, I think, for a teaching assistant. But yeah, I think I had more of an idea, but I still didn't fully understand how the landscape was going to change, especially in the last few years. Yeah, it's no secret how hard it is at the moment.
It's tough. It's really tough. And you mentioned your family.
Yeah.
So a big thing for us when we were speaking about why we decided to quit teaching was, you know, we've been teaching about 10 years now. So it's a long time for all of us. And a big thing that changed in our lives was we both had children around the same time. And it was huge for us seeing how this unbelievable job where we love helping the children as much as possible was starting to almost take away from what we could do for our own child.
Absolutely.
And, you know, my son's not even 2 yet. And already in that time, I thought to myself, he's not getting the best deal from me. 100%. And you mentioned obviously training when your daughter was born, I think.
Yeah, so I was actually pregnant when I was doing my teacher training, which is mental.
Yeah,
so I managed to finish just before I had her. I had her in May half term. And I finished literally a few days before.
Oh my God.
So she was really, really young when I was an NQT, not an ECT, but I was when I was
We're
training.
showing our age there, aren't we? We're NQTs all the way through.
So my NQT year, she was tiny, so I was juggling going back to work and her being really small. So it's all I've ever known. So my daughter's now 8 and my son, he was 4.5 months when I went back to teaching.
Wow.
So I had 2 little ones, they're 18 months apart. Lucky I had my mum, who's a huge help, because if I had to pay for childcare, I don't know what we would do. My husband's a teacher as well. So there's staff meetings, there's late nights, there's parents' evening. They always come at the same time. So we're always asking my mum to come and rescue us. But yeah, family and the dynamic that it had, I felt like every day when I was getting home from school, my patience had gone because of the nature of the type of person that becomes a teacher, I think you have your dedication to that role. It's a vocation, it's not a job, as we've always been told. But something has to give. Yeah. And for me, that was when I got home and I had no patience and they were tired and I was trying to cook dinner and I had Harry on my hip and Harper down playing, and I was trying to cook a spaghetti bolognese and it was all going to pot. And I needed to get them in bed because I needed to plan. So it was all rushy and I felt like I had no time, and that always coincided with my husband feeling the same because he had deadlines at work. So it really amazes me that a profession that is dedicated to children can have such an impact on the families of the people that are working in schools.
I think people underestimate how draining it actually is to be a teacher. Like we talk about all the time, right? That the public perception of teaching is not, it doesn't really match up, does it, with reality?
Not at all, no.
And it is unbelievably mentally draining. And it's not like it's just that though, because like you were just saying there, like it almost makes my blood boil sometimes because I'm like, I just can't believe this is still the state we're in, where on top of that, you're also going home and still having to do work.
Exactly.
Like that should be the end of it. It's sort of like you're going home and you're already completely exhausted and feeling like, your children are getting that sacrifice, like because you're just like, I've had a long day with children all day. And also I've got to plan more stuff.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the stuff that I felt like I had to do at home wasn't that directly impacting the children. I got really good at time management, really good.
You've got to, haven't you?
I had to, and I was able to do most of my work at school, and then come home. But there's always going to be stuff. There's always stuff that's going to be needed. And I work part-time as well. So I did 4 days and then I went down to 3 days. So that responsibility for the other member of staff that was in my class weighed quite heavy on me. And I almost felt like I overplanned for those days because if I was in the room, I could adapt and overcome. Whereas if I was leaving it for somebody else, I felt like I needed to make sure that everything was there. So I'd be waking up now, most recently, getting my children ready for school, checking to make sure all the plans are on there, making sure that they had everything they needed, checking for adaptation, making sure the timetable was right on my days off. And then having to plan as well, because you know what happens in schools, somebody goes off sick and you have to do more planning and you're picking up the slack. So yeah, the work-life balance is pretty much non-existent, even though I was aware that that was happening and I was trying to overcome it. Really difficult. And if I'm honest, not worth the sacrifice, because my children are only little ones. As much I'm 100% dedicated to the children that I teach. Lots of them have kept in touch since I've left, which is lovely, but not at the sacrifice of my own children and my own mental well-being. And I think that's really huge.
A big thing, I think, that again, because Joe Public, and do you know what? Fair enough to them. If they're not involved in teaching ever, of course they're going to look at our holidays. They're going to look at the amount of time off we get. They're going to see it as, you're just with the children, especially primary school teachers that we are. You're just colouring in with the kids. It's like there's a big gap in understanding of what actually goes on. But I think the biggest thing that is just not really understood, unless you've been in teaching before, going back to that point you said about part-time, because if you mention you went back to teaching part-time, I can imagine a lot of people's initial reaction is, what a jolly. Isn't that lovely? 3 days a week, just pop in, pop out. It's insane. And I know people work hard in every profession, and I'm never, ever someone who's going to sit here and say, teachers have it the hardest out of everyone in the world. But what I just want people to understand is that when you go part-time as a teacher, and maybe you can attest to this with your experience, it's not as simple as it just becoming a part-time job.
Do you know, I always say that I went part-time, but I was doing a full-time role in part-time hours for part-time pay.
Exactly.
In the 7 years that I was teaching, I did all the reports. I did all of the assessment. I did all the data drops. I even did all the assessment on my days so that it was consistent. So I was working part-time, and I know that's not everyone's experience. Sometimes you get a gem of a job share and everything's rosy, but I think now with the job that I've moved on to, I've been travelling around lots of different schools, and it seems to be the norm that happens, that one teacher tends to pick up the majority of the work, which is not okay and wouldn't happen in any other job.
We've been really lucky with our job shares. We've said it loads of times, and we know we're really fortunate because we have had those gems genuinely. But even still, I still have these conversations with people where I say, even though I've got an incredible job share and we genuinely are able to split, like basically any physical job does get split, But I say to people, but I tell you what I'm not doing is I'm 60% as well. I'm not going home and being like, I only have to learn 60% of the kids' names. I only have to worry about the data of 60% of my class. It's like, no, I still have 100% of the burden in terms of like the thought.
Special educational needs provision, EHCPs. You need to know those children so in depth, and you carry that burden. And it's that psychological burden as well of, at the end of the day, the reason we're all in teaching and love this profession is because we want to help children as much as possible.
Absolutely,
that's the bottom line. And as a teacher, that mental load, whether you're in 1 day a week or 5 days a week, is consistent. It doesn't change. You still need to adapt stuff for your children. And I think going part-time as a teacher, it saved me from quitting earlier.
Yes.
So I would have quit much sooner if I'd stayed full-time, no doubt about that. But it still gets to the end of your tether eventually, where I was part-time for 3-4 years. And I thought, you know what, even still now, I want to talk about how the mental load and the pay and the recognition and everything tied in with each other, there has to come a point where you just say, myself and my children and what I've got at home are going to come first.
Absolutely. But then my thinking is that I need to make loads of noise about this. Like I feel like I'm in a position where I can make change. And that's my whole setup now, is that it's not okay, and we need to speak out about it, because if we just go on pretending that it's okay for new teachers coming in, nobody's ever going to get any better. We're failing the children, we're failing teachers, and we need to stand up and say.
In terms of that, something I think we'll come into more detail about what you're doing now, because I think it's a really good example of how we can still help kids fundamentally, because that's what we care about. And I don't think leaving teaching necessarily means you suddenly just throw all that in.
No.
We're still going to be in education. We're still going to be working to give children better outcomes. But I just quickly wanted to come back to something Hayden mentioned the other day, which is that idea of part-time work and the financial strain.
Yes.
So we've got ideas of what we're going to be doing after teaching. You've got your role, etc. But that financial strain for a lot of people is stopping them from kind of coming out of teaching in general and trying to find a job that's on a similar wage, etc., and having those transferable skills, or even dropping part-time. What would you say to someone who's kind of in that situation of, I want to give it a go, but I just don't feel like I can financially? I
had all of those fears. I think it's terrifying because it's such a regular, I was going back when we were local authority, so getting that payment every month from the local authority felt really secure and really safe. And speaking about my family, we all had that. We were all employed. When I was dancing, I was self-employed, and that's one of the reasons that I trained as a teacher, because I couldn't handle the self-employed nature of not knowing where my contracts were coming from. But we got to the point, my husband and I, and he is an assistant head teacher, so he's in the same education industry. And we sat down and we said, can we imagine ourselves doing this when we're in our 60s? Because realistically, our pension age is going up. And he'll, no doubt, we probably won't even have a pension by the time we get to that age.
No such thing as retirement in 2050.
Will he be able to teach? Will I be able to teach? Is this what we want our life to look like? We've got 2 young children. We want to obviously give them the best possible life. So one of us had to make a change. And I had a vision and I had an idea. And luckily, he's very supportive. And he said, you go for it. You go part-time. We'll see if we can make this work. So I did a transition, and I did part-time teaching while doing my business on the side. And then I got to the point where I could eventually take that leap. But it's terrifying, really scary. So I can understand how everybody feels. But I do think you have to look at yourself in 10 years and think, is this where I want to be? I also got bored of listening to myself moan. I was.
How do you think we feel listening to the podcast, honestly?
My fellow teachers at my old school will attest to the fact that I wasn't quiet. I was the loudest in the staff meetings. I was the one that raised concerns. I was the one on the picket line. When the strikes were on, because I feel like we have to make ourselves a nuisance to be able to be heard, and that's really important. And I'm willing to be the voice of.
Can I pick up on that quickly? Because we speak, you've listened to the podcast. If people listening at home, I'm sure will know, we're not afraid to talk about the things that we think are broken. And it comes from a place of care and love. And I must say, last week when we spoke about leaving, we got so many messages. We have a huge core of listeners who are ECTs, who are just starting out. And I know for a fact, Hayden and I carry this burden, don't we, of are we scaring people away from this profession? And I think, I don't know, but maybe you can add to this, is we want to strike that balance, don't we?
Well, someone actually messaged me privately because, I've actually got my own account now. So people do message me as well.
Just bypass me now.
Yeah, they're just
I've done all the work for the podcast.
They say, I'm so glad you got an account, so I don't have to go through Dylan. It's like, don't worry, he wasn't checking anyway. All right, it's okay. And someone did message me though, and they're actually even one step before an ECT. They're just about to start training. And what was really nice, and this was in response to our episode last week about quitting teaching, is they actively said that they weren't put off. Yeah. They said, thank you for doing this, because it's really good to know what we're getting into. I'm training next year. The message didn't say thank you for this. No, good to know what I'm getting into. So I've just pulled out of my course. I'm going to go be a quantity surveyor. See you later. Cheers, guys. But they didn't say that, and I'm kind of glad that,
because we still need teachers.
100%, and I would still be teaching if all of the things that I'm fighting for now had been fixed by someone else. I would still be teaching, because the actual teaching is the bit that I love. It's everything else which I'm trying to change, and the direction that and the focuses that we're putting on education is what I'm trying to change. So I would still be teaching, and I really am hesitant. I know it's really hard, but to say you're quitting feels like you're making a choice to walk away, and that decision was so incredibly hard for me, which I'm sure it was for you. And I debated it for months and months and months, and the children were always at the centre, and that sounds really naff, but the children were always at the centre of it. But I felt like if I didn't leave and make a stand and start to do some of the changes that I'm talking about, then I'm doing them a disservice. So, that was my decision. But I can imagine that it's quite scary when you're looking in an industry. But I feel like that was the position we were in 10 years ago. It was starting to evolve into this industry that we see now. So the beginnings of the markings were there, and it didn't put me off. I was very fresh, and I felt like I could be the change.
Yeah, we're going to change the machine.
But how much can you change in your four walls of your classroom? You can be the most fantastic, and I've seen amazing teachers in their four walls, but without somebody stepping out and saying this is what needs to happen. We're going to be in the same position in 10 years.
Once that honeymoon period's over, you start
100%.
Teaching,
once you get your tricky class.
You're in the real world almost. Like the buzz is over, and you're like, hang on a minute. You start to appreciate maybe some of the things that people were telling you. So I remember being my first year of teaching. There'd be some much more experienced, wise staff saying things or having a gripe with certain things. And I remember literally thinking like, I don't know what their problem is.
Feels fine from my classroom.
That sounds like a great thing to do. I'll happily go home tonight and work until 10 p.m. because that's what we do as teachers. And I had that kind of martyr attitude. And then you kind of develop out of that zone.
That's drilled into you, isn't it? That sort of, this is how we do it. This is what you're supposed to sacrifice is drilled into us. But in no other industry is that expected or required. So I think there really needs to be, and I think it's starting, like some of the comments that I see on your podcast, it's starting to shift, and people, younger teachers are saying, no, actually, this is not okay. And I love the TikToks where they leave at like 3:40 and they've gone for a walk. Absolutely brilliant, because you shouldn't have to be chained to your desk until 6:30. And I've seen burnt out teachers where they've done that, and it's not okay, and it's not right, and it doesn't have any direct impact on the children, which is really sad.
And the shame is, you look at those TikTok videos and you look at the comments, there's so much hate.
Absolutely
so much hate. It's like people are like, no, we must race to the bottom. We have to race to the bottom. We talk about that a lot in our culture. But I want to go back to just thinking about you leaving, right? You said there was lots of factors that kind of built up over time. It's a big question, but if you could change, like what would be the one thing that was most likely? Because you said you'd love to have stayed in this game if people had fixed it from the sort of top down, I guess is what you're hinting at. What would be the thing that you would be like, they need to work on this first? Because obviously there's loads of things that need fixing. But what would be the thing that would be most likely where you'd be like, okay, if they started changing this, I might have thought about staying in the classroom?
For me, it was trust. Trust me to do my job. Trust me to know my children. I don't need to produce 20 reports for you to know that I know my children. I know them inside out. I know what they need to do next. Gap analysis, wonderful, very useful, but do I need it 3 times a term on things that I haven't taught them yet? I don't think so. My time is better spent creating resources or helping the children that need help in my class. That would be a huge thing, I think. Trust me to do my job.
Yeah, definitely.
And the other thing is huge, but support for SEND children, pupils of SEND. I don't know what's happened. I don't know where it's gone wrong. There's probably lots of factors of where it's gone wrong. But if they're in my classroom and I'm on my own and we're stripping back resources, stripping back staff, stripping back everything, and leaving me in a room with children that I can't meet their needs, there's something wrong.
Yeah. It's devastating, isn't it?
It's not through lack of trying either. It's
really,
not through lack of skill.
Exactly. We can do it, but we need to have the actual things in front of us to be able to. It's like being annoyed at a professional archer if they've left their longbow at home.
Absolutely.
It's like, they'd be great at doing this right now, but I can't do it because I don't have my bow and arrow in front of me.
True.
What an example.
I've been screwing that one for a while.
Surgeon expecting to operate and they've got no scalpel.
Yeah. No longbow. Yeah, it's mad, isn't it?
My surgeon doesn't often carry a longbow, I don't think.
I felt like I was failing not only those pupils with SEND, but I was failing the ones that were sat at the back where they'd become so used to disruption and so used to quite dangerous learning conditions that they were totally immune to it. Yeah. And if you asked them at the end of the day or said to them, oh, like, gosh, that was a bit of a day, like I've got my teacher voice on there, but that was a bit of a day, how, like, are you okay, how do you feel? They would go, oh, I don't know what happened. And that to me was really sad. I thought, no, that's not how we should be learning. I failed not only the pupil who was desperately trying to regulate themselves, I failed every single other pupil in there. And I found that really difficult.
Isn't that such a horrible thing, though, that we feel like that?
Horrible.
You said that I failed, like it was all your fault. But that's how people feel.
100%.
Like teachers are like, oh, I failed.
Yeah.
Because I didn't martyr myself for that extra hour I could do this thing. Or I failed because I couldn't literally physically meet their needs. You know, the whole longbow example. It's like I can't even do it anyway.
Come back to the
longbow. I'm not going to forget about the longbow is here to stay.
I left my longbow at home.
But it's so true because I think this is what we carry with us all the time. And this is where I struggle with the idea of quitting, like you said, because to me, it's catch-22 because I stay in the job and I feel bad that I just can't physically meet the needs of all these children, and I feel like the whole class is a detriment because of it. But then I feel like if I walk away, I'm kind of throwing in the towel. Yeah. So I guess where I want to talk to you now, Sophie, about your journey leaving teaching, and you've kind of alluded to this fact that you still want to carry on this idea of helping as many children as you can, and this idea I've got that I'm kind of going through right now, having decided to quit and having these ideas for the future that we're going to work on. How do you redefine your purpose now? Because like you said, we sat down before, we've all quit teaching at this point, you know, we've got the rest of the year, but we still sit here and say, oh yeah, I'm a teacher.
100%. I said it today, didn't I? I was like, well, what do you do? I'm a teacher. Yeah. It becomes your whole personality. Exactly. So it has been hard, but I think I will always be a teacher. Yeah. I will always try and keep my hand in teaching. I run a really lovely little study group from my daughter who struggles with math. So all her friends come back on a Wednesday evening and it's really lovely. They come back and I do some targeted teaching.
Oh, that's nice.
So I will always have that part of me, but my fight is better fought from a different position. And that position is that I can get to the key players and I can get to the people that I didn't have access to as a teacher, that I now suddenly do have access to through business, to try and make the changes that I would have liked to have seen in the classroom.
I think a huge amount of people listening to this now, after I was talking last week about quitting, and the amount of messages I got of people saying, yeah, I want to do that too, but what can I do next? And I love the kids and I want to make a difference. So I'm really interested now into how you're doing this with your business and the way you're going into actually not just helping the 32 children in your class anymore. And it's not like you've lost these 32 children suddenly. You're trying to help thousands now. So what is your journey looking like now?
So when my son started school, he's 6 now, I had 2 days a week where I had time on my hands, which is really unusual. And I started to think about my role as a teacher and how I was in year 3 at the time, we were continually trying to get children to be able to read. And we were sending my year 3s down to phonics. And I kept thinking about it and it never really sat right with me that I was sending a year 3 child down to year 1 or even reception to try and get them to read. And I felt like if we got the fundamentals right, I sat in many a Raising Standards meeting where I just felt like if we got it right on the downstairs level, the early years and the year 1, that we wouldn't have that impact. And I'm sure he's sitting there as year 6 teachers.
Yes.
You understand. We tend to, as a society, leave things until they become a loud problem instead of listening to the buzzing that starts much, much further down. So
that's a much better analogy than the longbow.
Yeah.
It's good.
I started to brainstorm ideas about ways that we could intervene, particularly in reading, because that's where my skill set was. earlier to ensure that children made progress when they needed to, and that they had resources, because that's a huge thing. There's no money in the budget. We're cutting TAs. We're cutting resources that we need. We're having to use rubbish prick sticks instead of proper prick sticks.
That's the real reason I left.
Everything's flying out of the book. So I started to play around with the idea of a reading assessment and reading record that had a whole host of ebooks attached to it.
That's nice.
To give teachers back time, because that was obviously huge to me. I moderated for a while, and when I was going into schools, I found that maths had amazing evidence, and writing obviously had wonderful evidence, but reading, we was always pulling together scraps of notes from TAs and post-it notes and home records that mums had scribbled in, and I'm really guilty of this. I write read well.
Yeah, of course.
And I'm a teacher, and now I've got a reading company, but I still write read well. And you're trying to pull together evidence, and the only real evidence is listening to the child read. So I had all these ideas, and then I have an amazing team who I was lucky enough to partner with, and we created a company called StoryZoo, which is a digital reading record with over 700 ebooks. Wow. They are incredible images that the children are likely to have seen, more akin to all of the games that they play when they go home, because I feel like we're battling that as well, and that's another thing. Attention span.
Absolutely.
Is huge, because we're scrolling and the children are seeing such amazing graphics, and then we're giving them an old copy of the books that we've got in the library.
Books that I read when I was...
Absolutely. So it's really, it's been an amazing journey so far. We're still pretty young in our journey, but I built it as a stepping stone for children to get that love of reading. It's a really key, I don't know if you've seen the statistics that have come from the National Literacy Trust. Really sad. 1 in 3 children have access to books. Really sad. So to try and combat that, obviously I'd love every child to go and pick up a classic and start reading it, but I think we need to bridge that, and that was where my idea came from. So StoryZoo is my new baby.
I think on that, the impact it can have is huge, and I think there is sometimes a little bit of snobbery. I don't know if you get this impression too from people who, if a child doesn't like to read or doesn't read, and then won't pick up a traditional book, you know, it's in front of them, and read it in a situation where they've gone to the school library, okay, this book's in your band, whatever, and here it is, take it home and read it. That child 15 books later still doesn't like and enjoy reading. Why are we doing the same thing in year 2 and then in year 3 and then in year 4, wondering why they can't read properly?
Absolutely.
We've got to meet children where they are. And if we talk about reading for enjoyment, that's not just like this.
No.
There's lots of children out there who don't enjoy maths. And we don't have this buzzword, maths for enjoyment. So I'm completely for reading for enjoyment.
You should coin that.
Maybe longbowing for enjoyment and archery for enjoyment. But what my point here is, we know how important reading is. So take every win you can. If
it's
a child's picking up a comic,
to everything, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I had a lot of children where they couldn't access the afternoon curriculum, and that's where children shine.
Right.
Science, technology, all of those wonderful subjects that we really want them to access, even down to like art history. I'm teaching art, but how wonderful if they could learn about an artist, but you can't access that if you can't read. And that's really where I started my journey, because if we don't target that and open up the enjoyment, and like you say, why would we judge what we don't judge adults for that they read?
Well, why would we?
No. Why would we judge children? We just want to get them reading. So exactly what you say, we meet them where they are. We give them resources and books that are akin to what they're seeing every day. And then hopefully we inspire those children to then go and read the classics.
Yeah, exactly.
One thing that piqued my interest as well with the whole idea in the business, I think it's fascinating, by the way, is the ebook side of things, right?
Yes.
And I'm presuming the idea is it will just continually expand this library, like, keep going, right?
Yeah.
I can think of children as a year 6 teacher as well. So even just with my hat on kind of the other end of the school, I can think of children right now in this class, previous class, you know, through my whole career, who have run out of books. In the school library, they've run out of books because whatever, you know, Dylan says bands, whatever level, whatever the school does to help children get the sort of right ability book for them. There are children that have run out, and every single year in my career, I've seen children run out of books because they're like, oh, I've read everything in this band, I don't know what to do now. And so the idea that I always feel like lost with that because I'm like, I don't know what to do. But the idea of them being like, being like, oh, I can just log in and I can find something that I like, and there's a new book added this week or whatever, and actually having more stuff to read.
And it was
really
hugely important to me and it is hugely important to my message that we never want to stop children reading physical books. That is the North Star. That's what we want them to be able to do. But to get to that point, if a child is on an iPad or on a device, that we'd rather them reading than watching YouTube. Yeah. My own children, no judgment, my own children, there's a time and a place.
Yeah, completely.
But could I get them reading? Absolutely. So I will swap one for the other and then we're benefiting. So I always want to make it really clear that as a teacher, obviously, I want children to read physical books. That's all I want. Yeah. But to get them to that point, what we're doing at the moment clearly isn't working. Exactly. So we have to change our dynamic and we have to change our direction.
What impact are you finding then already?
Huge. Yeah, it's had really good results. So we've worked really closely with our first set of schools that we've gone into. Enjoyment is up, attainment is up. All the comprehension quizzes, I obviously being a teacher have written to the reading domain, so you can have an actual view that the children are making progress and then use that to inform, because I think guided reading's always been a bit of an iffy subject. Do you do a carousel? Do you do
whole class reading or something?
There's no one answer for that,
is there? There's not, really. Is there? And I think class to class, my experience has changed. I've had classes where they would sit beautifully doing a carousel. I've had classes where I couldn't even look down at my book and look back up before there was carnage going up.
But that's realistic, isn't it?
Yeah, and so I think that you have to, and hopefully people listening are in a school where they let them adapt, but not always. You have to follow what is given to you. So we had huge success in the fact that one of our carousel groups could be on StoryZoo.
Sure.
And it was a wonderful incentive that actually next time you read, you're going to read with me, but the week after you're going to read with StoryZoo and you're going to collect your coins. So we've had really good results with attainment, as I said, and engagement, but also the little quotes that we get from the kids and the enjoyment from the kids is amazing. Yeah. It's really what keeps me going. And on the flip side, the teachers are loving it because it gives them so much time back. You haven't got to worry about any assessment. You get a lovely graph to show SLT. They can see an overview. We've got trust overview. It really takes the whole lot of pressure out. You haven't got to sign reading records. Your TA hasn't got to go out and sign the yellow books or change
and
books.
they haven't got, half of them haven't got the book.
Exactly. Or the drinks leaked at the bottom of the bag and it's drying on the radiator.
Every week.
We've all been there. But because as well, I found in my experience and talking to like the development group of teachers that we used when we were developing StoryZoo, is that TA's roles have changed as well. And typically when I was young, the TA would read with children one-to-one and they would go out and change the books, and that's completely changed. If your TA hasn't been deployed correctly, we all know that that's going to be on your lesson observation. So
it's
their roles change.
I think it's brilliant. And at the end of the day, right, Dylan knows this, he'll laugh. I'm a hard sell when it comes to like using new things in schools, right?
Yeah.
So to me, right, if I was there and I'm giving StoryZoo a go, right, and then we all know, I'm not going to pretend that teachers have loads of time. They can sit there and have like an hour of development a week where they get to try all new software. People just want to know, like, okay, is this good? What's it going to do for me? Can I use it right now, right? With my data head on, because again, I can't escape year 6, I'm really sorry. What sort of analysis, because you kind of glossed over analysis and like you sort of pricked my ears up at that point and I was thinking, leaders of schools.
Spreadsheet? Yes,
I want to know what I can track, what I can see. So like what kind of things, because I presume with it being ebooks, we can see a lot about.
There's me thinking enjoyment.
I know. Numbers, get away from enjoyment. How can I prove to my bosses that the numbers are going up?
Schools need both.
It is that, isn't it? And it's finding that balance. So for me, I always wanted the children to never know that they were being assessed.
Right.
Yeah.
Everything looks the same. Everything's really friendly and cheery, and you just happen to be answering questions. From a teacher's side, you can see how many of each reading domain that child is getting correct. You can see their reading speed. You can see how long they've spent reading on a book, which tells you a huge amount. In development, we could see the average reading speeds, and we can adjust those. And then you can get a whole school overview. So it comes down to, you can have like school competitions, which is always great.
That's good.
So you can pitch your year 6 classes against each other and see who can read the most.
Nice.
So you can get a whole overview of where the child is at attainment-wise, but also in a more holistic view, you can see their book trends and what books they're choosing to read, because they have access to all of the books in their library for their for their reading band that you as a teacher have set, you can see this, you can start to see the trends. And like you said, the child that reads 15 books and still doesn't enjoy reading, I feel like that's maybe on me as a teacher, that I haven't exposed them to the right text that they need to find.
Definitely. But don't you think that's part of the reason why teachers burn out and end up thinking like they need to leave? Because that is one tiny job. What I love about this story...
Who's got time to do that?
Honestly, because what I love about your story is you identified earlier on about how your expertise and passion was reading.
Yes.
And as a primary school teacher, I find myself being spread so thinly that I need to become an expert in how geography goes across the year 2, 3, 4, 5 and how all the skills...
Yes.
I'm not being funny, and I can say this now, I don't really care enough about it. I simply am not involved enough in that. It's
but
one
it has
tiny
no
thing.
impact on the children, whether you know, does it?
Completely.
That's a tick box in it.
Exactly. And there's someone out there who is geography expert
who will know
say,
that.
and you know what? I'm saying all power to you. Help me out here. Make something for me. And having left the classroom, it sounds like you can really narrow down on what your expertise is. You're passionate about reading.
Absolutely.
And you can impact so many children through what you're doing right now in a way where you don't need to worry about 57 other things. You can just do this one thing really well.
Yeah.
I need to know if you're a type B teacher, because it feels like we're type B teachers, you know, ones where we're just scatty, we'll forget things.
Impression.
But like it sounds like you're building it for us. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm building it for myself. I am the type of teacher that has scribbled something on a piece of paper and is looking through my desk drawer trying to find it. I can picture it. I know it's there. But I feel like that really I honed during my years as teaching, that I cut out the bits that were unnecessary.
Completely.
And I did the bits that had a direct impact either on myself or on the children. And I waited, and I had this really good skill that I perfected over the years. I waited until I needed to do something or it was being asked of me before I did it. Because otherwise I was writing things and writing reports that never got read or never needed, or I was creating, like you say, curriculum progression documents that nobody ever looked at, or by the time I'd written it, something else had come out in the news that I had to do. And I really quickly learned that I could prioritise and I could push those jobs to the side. And I think for ECTs, NQTs, it's really important that you learn that early on, that not everything is urgent and the things in the classroom are much more important than anything else that's going on. Except if it's sports day and you've forgotten to wear your sports kit, which has happened.
You have basically summarised what I think is one of the worst traits of teachers in the whole profession, right? Is that whole concept of rushing into a new thing. Oh, let's do all this stuff. Realizing that we didn't need to do half the stuff, but we've already done it.
Backtrack.
And then you change your mind, you do things, and you just think, oh, if I just waited maybe a month and didn't do all this stuff 6 months in advance, I might have not had to do that. And I feel like I get penalised for doing that sometimes. I feel like people will look negatively upon me because I do exactly the same as that.
Yeah.
Like I'll just leave something, and if it really needs doing, I'll do it sort of closer to the
You do have to teach a lesson, Hayden. You can't just stay in the staff room.
And I think you just think you never know. The kids might not turn up. They always do.
I know you want your treats in the staff room, mate, but you do have to do the teaching bit.
No, I think that's really, really important. And I think that's where a lot of the burnout comes from. And a lot of the teachers, really good teachers that I've seen burn out, has come from that fact that they are trying to do everything to the best of their ability. And I really quickly learned that I couldn't do that. I needed to prioritise where my attention and where my effort went.
Yeah, definitely.
Got really good at that. If anyone needs any advice.
I think StoryZoo, going back to that, is a really, really exciting way.
Thank you.
To help particularly people like me. I kind of wish I had this. Annoyingly, not the point where I stopped teaching. Maybe like 10 years ago. That would have been
I'll give you
nice.
a 3-week trial.
Yeah, absolutely. But like, 3 weeks after I quit. So wait till the day that I've stopped, and then I'll take that. And I'll be like, oh, that would have been really, really helpful.
Imaginary class really well.
Yeah. So I saw. Obviously, I was having a quick look through the website before we started. So there's like a. I mean, I got hooked on this bit. Dylan's going to laugh at me again because I got hooked on the fact that I have a little zoo as well. So can you tell me a bit more about this?
So huge thing, and especially for my co-founder Ben, who his children are will be pupils of SEND. They're very little at the moment, but for all the children that I've ever taught who have been put in the corner with a book and that's their lesson because they can't access the lesson, it was really important to us that we had a comprehensive set of features for pupils with SEND. So you can change the overlay of all the books in the library, not just one tiny piece of plastic that somebody's found at the back of the cupboard to help that poor child. Who knows how to find out if it's the right colour? We just chuck a colour at them, bless them. So you can change the overlay, you can change the font, you can change the size. Good. And then also that gamification was really important to me, that it was kept restricted enough that children went on there to read, because I know there's loads of programs out there where I send children home to do homework. They've played the games, they come back and I say, so have you learned that spelling rule? And they go, what spelling rule? I got 100. I'm thinking, do you know how to spell that word?
Can you spell 100?
Yeah, no. So the gamification, I wanted to make sure from a teacher point of view was restricted enough that I knew that they were going on there for a purpose. But fun enough for all those pupils, all pupils, but especially ADHD, ASD, those children that get hooked on things, to make sure that they had enough. So the zoo really reminds me of like a Zoo Tycoon that I used to play on the PC, if you're old enough to remember that.
I remember you telling me a story about someone who got 100 capybaras.
They did, and I think they're still collecting to this day.
I'm sorry.
So obviously capybaras, any teachers out there, they're really hot. And 100 capybaras, and I think they were all called Dave, which is really funny.
I've got one thing I wanted to ask. Could you get some longbows and some archery?
Honestly, you need to leave it.
Yeah, we did toy with how to keep the children engaged for longer, and thought about a like Tamagotchi style health rating, but we quickly thought that was quite cruel.
Well, here's the thing with gamification and ed tech in general. Hayden and I have been huge proponents for using technology for good, because I think there's two sets of people in the world. There's the idealists and there's the realists. And being an idealist is fantastic, isn't it? It's like this utopian world where children don't need to be sat in front of the iPad and the screen time isn't a thing. In the real world, you touched upon it there are going to be children where this is a reality for them. And also in the real world, technology is real and it's advancing quicker than you can imagine right now with AI and etc. And just in general, it's going so fast. So I think we have to adopt it, and we have to, like you said, meet the children where they are. We spoke about reading for enjoyment. We want children to read more. And if it means that we take advantage of the fact that there's a zoo that they can earn some coins on to get a little capybara to add to those, but they end up reading because of it. And if they have special educational needs, and actually this hits it so much that they're reading 5 times as much as they were beforehand, I can't see a situation where someone can sit here and tell me how that's a bad thing.
I know, it's really hard. And we have come up against resistance, and I think that resistance has a place, but like you say, that's a utopia where children are accessing far more than even we were, and the jobs that are around now you wouldn't have even been able to imagine when I was in primary school. So I think we have to move with them, and there's a lot of fear around AI, and I hope everybody used AI to write their reports this summer.
We've been a big proponent for that.
There's a lot of fear, and I think that education is the way around that. And if you don't teach teachers how to use technology to better the children, and it has a real place in education, then we're doing them a disservice, and we need to expose them to this. I've got a Kindle. I've had a Kindle for 15 years. I choose to read physical books, but I also choose to read on a Kindle when it suits me. So it's no different to that. And I see, as I said before, if a child is on their iPad, I would rather they were reading than scrolling through YouTube videos.
You're an individual. How you read is different. How you read, how I read is different. We can't have this blanket idea of what reading should look like, because at the end of the day, I just want children reading more. And, I completely agree, by the way, that technology needs to be the way forward. And I think we all know, sat here, having delivered how many e-safety lessons, that there is huge dangers online for children. But in a tech sense, it's not just free reign of the internet for the children. It's very specifically curated by experts in the educational field to give some kind of gamification to get children online. But at the end of the day, what the end goal here is that children are reading more and children are enjoying reading more. That is a good for the world.
And I felt like when I was developing StoryZoo, obviously I did a lot of research into EdTech, and from my own personal experience, I felt like we used and bought a lot of software that was built by tech entrepreneurs and not built by teachers. And so it did some of the things that I wanted it to do, but there was always a gap, and there was always, if it could do that. Yeah. And they were inaccessible. So they were out in, I imagine, Silicon Valley. I've got no idea. In my head, they're away somewhere hot. And I had no way as a lowly teacher of accessing them or saying, it'd be really good if you could do this. So as I was developing StoryZoo, it was really important to me that I was as accessible as possible. I give my email out. I have a direct line from teachers, but also that we did loads of workshops with teachers to make sure that it was exactly what was needed. And as I've travelled, we've gone all around the country now. We deliver free reading workshops as well, as part of our ethos is to make technology as accessible as possible. So as I've gone around the country delivering free reading workshops, I found that it's not just me that felt like that the technology just had not caught up with what we needed as teachers. So that was hugely important, that we solved a problem that was actually there rather than creating technology for what we thought
for the sake
was
of it
needed.
Yeah, completely.
I think what you're building is really exciting.
Thank you.
I think you're building a really exciting product.
I'm very excited for you both as well.
I know, well, we're leaving. And do you know what? You come in from the reading specialist side.
Yeah.
Anyone listening to the podcast knows that maths is our thing. And very similarly to the way we're saying that, being able to break down words and understand them, that journey of reading, we see the same thing with maths and arithmetic being almost put to one side.
Oh, absolutely.
Because ultimately, like you said, reasoning is 2/3 of the maths stats papers and how we judge children. Actually, in the real world, okay, fair enough. There's going to be a lot of arithmetic, but you need to be able to solve problems. I get all that, and I know how important reasoning and problem solving is. And because I think that's important, I think we all just kind of blindly walk through education going, well, we need to do lots of that. And I think arithmetic is put on such a back seat right now where there's not enough practice. Kids need to do it. Kids need to read more. Kids need to do more basic maths. The amount of children who will get to year 6 now and can't double. The amount of children who get to year 6 and their number sense is just I don't really understand number, but they can kind of get through, gloss through it and not understand what's going on. That is also having a detriment. And if I think about the role of school in terms of academics, because I think school has a huge role to play socially, etc., and helping out. But in terms of academics, as a teacher, what I really fundamentally care about is that they can read well and understand text. They can do maths. And from that, they can have their interests and understanding of the wider society of history, geography, etc. But it comes from these two basic things.
And we're not giving them the building blocks, like you say. So I feel like my experience with maths is that I ended up having to teach them methods to overcome the fact that they had no solid foundation. And I was seeing more and more towards the end of before I left that there was no number sense and there was no linking mathematical ideas. So I was plastering over that fact by teaching them methods. But if this exactly the same as reading, if we get that right when they're really little and we give them the solid foundation, then the reasoning comes later. You can't reason with numbers that you can't make a relationship with in your head. So
the way I see education in my head is we have tried to, over the last 10 years, 15 years, whatever it is, we've got to the point where we are building understanding in reading and maths on the smallest foundation that we can get away with.
It's like we're building a house on stilts.
Completely.
Exactly that. Exactly that. You know, and it just can't be stripped. And actually, do you know what? We just need to strengthen those foundations in arithmetic, in reading.
But it will have a natural knock-on effect. I just think that from our point of view here, I think all three of us sat here thinking, okay, we've left the classroom. How can we redefine the purpose of being so passionate about education and wanting to help children so much? This is where I see in the next few years how we can still do that. And it really excites me.
Impact,
and I think
refocusing
on gap analysis and filling gaps and interventions are all great, but imagine a world where we get it right the first time.
And
we don't need that. Let's put all of the effort into this early stage and then we'll have wonderful, articulate
build on a
fantastic
foundation. You know what I mean? Well, so in my last 3 weeks, in my last 3 weeks when I try out StoryZoo, what actually would be the first step? I'm sure we've got a lot of listeners who right now are probably thinking, okay, I'm going to go check this out. What actually is the first step? Like, how do I go from not knowing anything about it to maybe using it in my school?
So we've got a wonderful website, StoryZoo.org. And as I say, you've always got a direct line to me. So if you're listening and you want a free reading workshop or you want to find out more, I can do a demo call.
I do.
Sophie at StoryZoo.org. It comes straight through to me and I handle all inquiries myself. So
Brilliant.
They're coming from a teacher-based perspective.
Fantastic.
And you've got the best interest of the kids at heart, I can tell that.
Absolutely, I really have. And I think that they are the the children, our generation of children, are literally going to change the world.
100%.
They've got the fight and the drive and none of the anxiety that we had when we were at school. We just need to give them the skills and give them the foundation. And I think that's my mission now. Definitely. Outside the classroom.
Sophie, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on here.
Thank you so much. It was lovely to meet you both.
No, thank you. And even just from a selfish position, just for one moment.
It's not like you to be selfish.
Just for one moment, like as we're just about to embark on this new adventure and leaving teaching, which is scary for us. You know, we might give it the talk on the podcast, but we are nervous about it. It does fill me with a bit of hope that there are positions out there and there are things that you can do within education. You might not be that classroom teacher, but you can still impact it.
Oh,
people.
Yeah, 100%.
So, thank you for that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hey everyone, Dylan here, hoping that you enjoyed that episode. I'm just jumping on now to give you a little outro. As you can see, no Hayden, couldn't be bothered to turn up for you guys. How dare he? But as always, if you have got this far into this episode, we massively appreciate you. You can get in touch with us on Instagram at Teach Sleep Repeat Podcast, on TikTok at Teach Sleep Repeat Podcast, and a huge favour you can do for us is to just leave us a rating wherever you get your podcasts. It helps us out massively. Now, anyone watching the video of this podcast will see behind me a little sneak peek at our new setup, couple of chairs, couple of mic arms, couple of lights. Nothing absolutely complete and finished yet, but it was a great experience to be in an actual podcast studio for this week's episode, and it really gave us a taste of what's to come for us. Guys, thank you again, and we'll see you again next week for another episode of Teach Sleep Repeat.